Recording is live. Take it away, Lene.
Great. Well, hello, everyone. Thanks for coming out tonight virtually. This is our How to Plan a Job Search event with Nick Anderson from General Assembly. We're super excited to have him here today. And we are the Denver UX newbies. We're also under Denver UX now. We just joined them, so we're kind of in an umbrella under them. And we actually have our next event coming up with Denver UX. It'll be in July. And this event I'm super excited about. This is an event with Amy Bucher. She's Vice President of Behavioral Design at Rovio. She's awesome in this space for behavioral design, which is something that I'm super passionate about because of my psychology background. So very excited about this. She's going to be coming to tell us about the COM-B model and how to use that for behavior change design in UX. And she also wrote this really awesome book that I love. It's called Engaged. So that's how I found out about her and why I convinced her to come to our group and talk to us. So that should be a really exciting event coming up in July. And that's all I have to tell you guys about today. So Nick, if you'd like to take it away, I'll stop sharing my screen here.
All right, hi everybody. How's it going? Great. No one's unmuted, so why would you be?
Great, Nick. Super.
Hey, thanks. So happy to hear that, Ryan. Thank you. All right, y'all see my screen? We good? All right, great.
Loading.
So, all right, let's talk about this. Let's get a Jord. Some little reference from my elder millennials. You can? Hell yeah. Great. Awesome. Shout out to Homestar Runner. Let's talk about this. Getting a job. All right, so congratulations. You finished your UX training, whether that was through one of my schools here at GA or whether that was through some other college situation. You're now officially unemployed. In fact, statistically speaking, you will be unemployed for the next 3 to 9 months. This is something that my students hate to hear. It is something we told you when you started my class, but it sucks to hear. And normally here I have a button that we press where we see what 3 to 9 months will look like. 9 months now has you guys post December. It's 2021 when you get a job. So just take a moment to let that sink in. Now, I know not everyone here graduated today. That's not exactly the bar we're going for. Normally I do this around the last day of my class, but the fact is that 3 to 6, 9 months is a completely normal time frame for looking for a job, and it lasting longer or in some cases shorter is not out of the ordinary either. Sometimes it takes a lot longer. So let's talk about what you do now that you are officially unemployed. I want to be clear, this is the most important thing I want to tell you. If all you do from here is apply to jobs, you will not get a job. Here I've written it in a slightly larger font. If all you do from here is apply to jobs, you're not going to get a job. There's a chance, but that is probably not going to get you the job. So let's pretend you want to be Mr. or Mrs. Olympia. This is what Arnold Schwarzenegger won back in the 80s, 60s, 70s. When did Pump Up? It doesn't matter. Anyway, let's say you want to get fucking swole, you want to win, and you just got coached as hell. If you were one of my students, I yelled at you a bunch and told you to get your shit together. And now you're ripped as fuck, like Kumail Nanjiani now. He's an eternal. He used to be a pudgy nerd comedian, and now he's ripped as hell. The competition is in 9 months from now. What are you going to do until then? You just finished all this training. What are you going to do? Way too many of you are this. You sit there and you're like, I will apply for a job. I've applied for a job. I'll apply for another job. Meanwhile, you're not practicing your skills. You're not getting better at anything. You're just still right where you are, like the day you graduated, with nothing to show for what you've done. And you start looking to other people to blame. So here's my best pro tip is to get your shit together or die. We need to figure out how you're going to get a job by actually putting effort in. So what we don't a lot of times, and so I'm also, to give a little background about myself, which I should have done in the beginning here, I teach user experience design at General Assembly. I'm located in Denver. That used to be my haunt, and now I teach the West Coast online. So I do California, Seattle, Denver, all the places that share that Pacific time zone. And I went to the Art Institute of Colorado, which is best known for being sued out of oblivion for being a for-profit institution that didn't give a shit whether I got a job or not. All they cared is that I had a pulse and I could sign a check and I could take out student loans. That's what they wanted from me, as someone who will take out student loans and go through it. I might be one or two of the only people in my graduating class who went on to get jobs in the industry they paid and trained for. I was paying about $60,000 a year to go to college there over 4 years, had a huge amount of student loan coming out of it. And so needless to say, I have a very soured perception of for-profit education, right? Now you're probably thinking, Nick, don't you work for a for-profit education company? Yes. And I interviewed at a lot of them before I decided where I wanted to go. And when I started, I took a 3-month contract and I said, I want to do this. I want to make a transition from product design to teaching. It's something I've always wanted to do, but I've always been told the pay sucks and you need a master's degree. Then as we started to see GA, Galvanize, Turing, all these other sort of forces start to line up and teach in a different manner, I was being told you just need to have skills and you will be paid competitively with like agency work. And I was like, cool, sign me up. This is what I've always wanted to do. If I don't have to take a step down in my standard of living and the things I want to do, then yes, I would like to do this. And I said, but if I take this 3-month contract and my students don't graduate, don't learn enough, don't get jobs, I can't do this, right? Because I don't want to be a proprietor of the problem I was given when I graduated from college, right? GA has continued to prove that this is something that they're serious about. And I could go on for hours about how GA's entire profit model is different and why it works, right? So what I can say is that y'all come in, it's my job to train you to be better. This is what everybody experienced here, right? And this whole time you've been being coached, you've been being told this is what you're doing, this is what we can do. And then what we generally don't tell you is that after that is the hardest part. Is now you are doing all the same workouts, you need all the same training, but your coach is gone, right? You were being given like daily homework, you were given projects, assignments, I was grading it, I was telling you, this is what I do, this is what you need to do, this is how it could get better, and then that disappears. And your assumption is that you're done, now you're ready for a job, and that's never the case in a creative role, right? So what I do a lot when I talk to students about this is I relate this to other craft industries. If you're a carpenter, a metal worker, someone who designs bathrooms, interior design, something like that, you have to keep practicing to get better. If you're really good at a sport, you don't just stay good at that sport if you stop, it starts to go down and you have to keep working out. In fact, what is it? Foxcatcher, that movie's all about, not Channing Tatum, who is it? Anyway, I digress. This is kind of what I do is I go on a lot of tangents here. The point is that you got coached really hard, but every moment you're not working out and not trying to get better, you're getting worse, right? And so now that you've graduated, you're in this zone where you don't have assignments, deadlines, accountability, structure, support in any way whatsoever. And so it's just natural that you start to come down a little bit and you start doing worse. This means that you need to create your own structure, goals, deadlines. Some of us will find this harder than others. I have ADD. I'm really open with that in my classes. And if I don't write things down on a calendar, if I don't have a to-do list, it just straight up doesn't happen. I need these things, but I've learned how to do them through 15, 20 years of struggling and figuring out what I need to do in order to be effective, right? So what I want to do is break down, not our curriculum, but the process and investigate why it works. So what we're going to do as we figure out what to do next in your career here is figure out how to set up some goals for a job hunting journey. And we're going to do long-term, weekly, and daily goals that help you figure out exactly what you need to do each moment to move yourself forward. So let's start with long-term goals. First piece of advice I'll give you is to get comfy. So this is some data visualization created by someone in the data science field, but it's not that unrelated to other craft-based technological skills, whether that's web development or user experience design. This is them showcasing exactly what jobs they applied for and how long it took to get that actual job. So you can see they applied for 207 jobs, 116 through LinkedIn, 68 through website posting. And of that 207, 145 were no response. 58 was rejected, right? That leaves only 12 in the other category, all right? This is normal. And I know that when you experience this, you feel like a piece of shit. You're like, how is it possible that I've applied for 207 jobs and only 12 want to actually talk to me, right? That is the ratio. We have a really booming economy of a lot of places starting up, but what's happened as a result is the scrutiny has gotten tighter of who they want to hire for what reasons. I can go off on this for a whole tangent, but you're going to hear a lot of misnomers out there. For instance, that there is job scarcity, that boot camps have created a saturation in the market, that there's no junior level positions. All of that is not true. It is 100% not true. What's happened is that the market has changed. You don't see junior level jobs. What you do see is jobs that say 3 to 5 years experience, and my students consistently get those jobs, even if they've only been trained for 3 months, right? What you see is that because there's a lot of people in the field, it's harder to make a decision over who is right to hire and who isn't. If you are a hiring manager, what you are hiring for a UX designer is someone who can make good decisions and look at their portfolio, and none of that is proven, right? I remember, so my first year teaching, I taught the web development course at GA because I'm also a full stack developer. I've just focused more on UX design because I like it more. It's a more happy field. I like what I'm doing there more, but I will say that grading homework for the web development class was so much easier than grading homework for UX. In web development, I say make a JavaScript function that reverses the link order of this list. And you turn it into me and I run it. And if it does that, you pass. If it doesn't, you fail, right? And yes, there are discussions as to a more efficient way to do it, a more modern way, a better way for certain APIs and tools like that. But the fact is that it does work or it doesn't. And people are going to hire developers who get shit done, regardless of being able to assess the exact nuance of whether that was the correct way to do it or not, right? When I grade UX homework, you turn in a design to me and I'm like, I think this is probably correct. We would know in 3 to 6 months if it was going to go live. But we don't have time to do that. And we don't have time to test with an audience of 500,000 users. And so we'll never know, right? And so for UX design, you have a huge burden of proof that cannot be communicated just in looking at your portfolio. They need to know that your design decisions are good, not just that your designs are pretty, not just that you explaining it to them makes sense, but that after implemented 3 to 6 months later, they are seeing an uptick in onboarding, retention, monetization. Like, there's so many things that can't be proven. And so I'm not trying to make excuses for the employer that has you interview 7 fucking times and do a take-home test that takes 48 hours to do. What I'm saying is there is a little bit of truth to that, is that it's so hard to assess whether you're good or not just by looking at your portfolio, right? And so this measure of 12 yeses to almost 200 no's is correct. There is so much out there and all of these different ways of assessing it. And when you start getting really crazy about assessing what is right, is this correct, am I doing this right, you get a lot of bullshit with that too. You get a lot of cognitive bias, a lot of unconscious bias, where people are creating weird things. Like Google has come out and said that their weird questions that are like logic puzzles straight up don't work. I have a friend who works at Google, and he talks about when he got hired, they asked him like, okay, there's 100 light bulbs in one room and then 100 light switches in the next room. What is the least amount of times you can flip the switch and then go into the next room to determine what light bulb attaches to what light switch, right? And after years of doing this, Google said the only thing we got good at was hiring people who were really good at logical thinking problems. It had nothing to do with whether they were good at a team, whether they were empathetic, whether they knew how to actually design for users. All it proved is they're very good at brain teasers, right? But you're still going to go on interviews where that is thrown out at you as a gate. And a lot of times people do it because it makes them feel good. They know the answer, you don't. It's a power trip, right? So you're going to get a lot of bullshit in this mix. And I just want to really emphasize, this is a nightmare. This whole experience is a fucking nightmare of trying to go on these interviews and not knowing what these people are looking for, right? What I do want to emphasize is that if you have gone through a recent UX bootcamp or you are new from an undergrad degree, you do have some really, really good skills that maybe are not being talked about enough, or maybe you don't know how to represent. I've worked with so many UX designers, and literally I had to quit out of Slack because I was talking to a former student about this just now. She's been in her job about a month now. And she was like, you were right. There are people here who have been here for years. They don't listen to designers. They have no idea what they're doing, right? They got there through seniority, through being promoted as a graphic designer, even though they didn't know what UX meant, but they were told, well, you're the art person, just become UX, that's fine. Right? You have all these people who don't know what they're doing. It's this gigantic confabulation of all these people who don't really know what they're doing. And we're just trying to show them that we know what we're doing and that we deserve a spot. The people that are going to hire you are folks that are excited by 2 things. One is that you just learned all the latest stuff, right? Whether that was this year, last year, the year before. You know what Figma is. You know how components and variants work. You know how Envision works. You have an iPhone and you use apps regularly, right? Those are huge things because a lot of these huge corporations have an aging population. And I don't mean age in the physical age. I mean as people who have been UX designers too long without going back for re-education, without reaching outward to figure out what else is going on, right? They're stuck in their ways because they found a pattern that works. What's interesting about you as a hiring force is that you know these new things that have just come out and you're excited about them. The second is that if you just finished school, especially if you just finished my class, you're moving at 90 miles an hour in terms of adaptability. You will learn whatever is put in front of you. You don't have preferences. You don't have stickler issues of like, well, I only work in XD. I only use this type of synthesis. You're willing to learn anything, right? And this comes down to the buy versus a build model for talent. So I was a consultant for Aetna for a small amount of time. I worked there for about 5 months. They brought me in as a consultant basically because they had this team of talented designers that couldn't launch an app. They had no idea how to get this app out. 3 years in a row had not launched the app. And they're like, we're the only insurance company that doesn't have an app. Why don't we have an app? And so what they asked me to do was figure out what was going on, right? And what they had is a lot of super senior designers who had learned a certain way and a certain way to do things. And they were just stuck in that role. They had not thought about adaptability. They'd not learned new things. There was no symbols in their sketch files. There's nothing going on there. They were just moving forward saying like, well, of course this needs to work, right? What they had done is they did the buy model. They bought high-level talent and said, well, this person helped launch this startup. We're going to pay them $200,000 a year. And I'm sure if we get enough of these powerhouses together, then it will work. And that doesn't work. What you need a lot of times is this build model where you bring in people who are junior talent and you slowly bring them up from there. So you're going to be interviewing with companies that are more of this build talent model versus buy. All right. So from here, in terms of long-term goal setting, the key to your job search is to treat it like a UX project. You know how to analyze data, you know how to collect it, you know how to interpret that and then make decisions. What we need to do is start applying that to stuff that isn't strictly design-based, right? So think of it this way. You're trying to convince users, which is your employer, to try your product, which is you as a designer. You are trying to sell yourself as a product to this design company. To gain users, you have to build your product into something desirable and this is important, effectively communicate how good your product is. There are so many designers I know who do amazing work. They're great visual designers, they're great researchers, they're great synthesizers. But when it comes time to talk about their work, they're bad at it. They make bad case studies. They don't show confidence when they talk about it. And that salesmanship is a huge part of it. Communication is a huge part of the job. As Mike Montero said, confidence is part of the job as a designer. You have to go in and say like, this is good work. This is how we do it. So the translation here is you need to learn the skills employers need, which if you're fresh out of school, you probably have those. You just got to maintain them. And then showcase effectively that you have those skills, right? And it goes much deeper than this superficial dribble vision of like, well, look at this, isn't that beautiful? My color theory is great. I need to see that you know how to make things work, not just make things beautiful. So let's start with research. Do you know what employers are looking for? Chances are you have the fundamental skills needed to be a junior designer if you have finished some program, but there's always more to learn, of course. So take some time to research the types of job roles you want. Look at the job posts, the job descriptions, and then DM people on LinkedIn that are doing the work you want to be doing. Learn everything you can about what's in demand. Now, I really want to emphasize this. DM random people on LinkedIn, cold call them. I get about 1 or 2 a week, just random people hitting me up and saying, hey, what do you think about this? Or I saw like a YouTube interview with you. Do you want to talk about this? Can you look at my work? And because I'm in the business of like training junior designers how to do this effectively, and I'm genuinely passionate about UX and about teaching, I always answer those LinkedIn messages. It might take me a week, right? I'm always a little bit behind, but I'm going to answer those, right? And you're going to find tons of people who actually care about talking to you. I challenged my students to do this a couple of years ago. One of my students reached out to every UX designer in Boulder, because we're in Denver. So she's like, I'll just hit up every UX designer at the Boulder campus. Only one of them wrote back, but that one, Spencer Seafried, he became a really close friend of mine. He ended up coming to my class to talk about Google. He brought that student, Sally Wright, up to the campus and showed her as much as he could under like NDA policies. I continue to do, and in fact, on June 16th, I'm going to do another Google interview with him and a bunch of other UX designers. He literally paved the way for GA, at least GA Denver's connection with the Google campus, right? And our lunch and learns and our series there, right? Through a student who was just curious and wanted to have lunch with them, right? My next class up the ante there, I had a student who wrote Jared Spool on LinkedIn, who he has written numerous books for O'Reilly. He's one of the most famous UX designers in our hemisphere here. And she ended up just talking to him. And I would walk behind her desk and I'd be like, Maureen, what are you talking to Jared Spool about? Because I can see this LinkedIn message going on. And she's like, his cats are so crazy. They want to eat lemons when he puts them out on the counter. I'm like, oh, so nothing. You're just chatting with Jared Spool about random bullshit, right? Like there is a group of UX designers who just genuinely like want to talk to people who are being inspired and like want to get into this role. And you don't have anything to prove. As long as you're not a weirdo about it and you're just talking to them about what their work is, a lot of us want to talk. So let's move on here. When it comes to pro tips here, mostly ignore required years of experience. Apply to jobs you think you could do because time is a flat circle. I'm so tired of time being used as a methodology for determining whether you're ready for something. In 2015, I got married and bought a house. The planning required for both of those meant that I maybe put in 20 hours a day at my job. I was on the phone with real estate agents, with wedding planners, with insurance agents, all sorts of things. At that point, I pretty much had my job automated. I had a group of minions that were doing work for me. I would go and read a book in the park. I would leave at 4 p.m. if it looked like it was going to rain and I wanted to mow the lawn, right? I did 20 hours of work that year, every day, or not every day, every week. But if you look at my resume, it says I worked there for a year, right? I think we've all had bullshit jobs where it says I've been here a year and you're like, yeah, I was high the whole time, but sure, yeah, I was there. It doesn't work that way. And we're slowly realizing that that's not what people want to hear. The last great job posting I saw once said, rather than 3 to 5 years experience, they want to see 3 to 5 relevant projects. I was like, yes, that is what I'm looking for. Show me that you know what you're doing. That's what matters. So if you're looking at a job description, and I'm not talking like senior creative director, 30 years experience in business management. I'm talking you're looking at a junior or like not junior, a UX design role. And it says all of the things you can do: Figma proficiency, research, understanding, affinity mapping, journey mapping, personas, all this stuff. And then at the bottom, it's like 3 to 5 years experience. Fuck that. Apply for that job and show them that you can do it, right? Have the projects to back it up, but there's no reason you shouldn't go for that job. Here's another one. Does the job require HTML, CSS, and JavaScript? If so, it's okay to apply even if you're not super comfortable with coding yet, as long as you'd like to know more. Asking someone if they know JavaScript is like saying, do you know how pliers work? They're like, yeah, like to a degree. It's like, all pliers? I don't know. It's like, for what? For plumbing? Like, I'm not comfortable doing plumbing work in my house, but I can like loosen the seat post on a bike if you want me to, right? Like, it's this gigantic ocean of things. I think when people are looking for UX engineers, people who know some of these languages, a lot of times they're looking for people who are just comfortable learning it and getting better. There are so many designers that literally put up their hand and say, don't talk code with me. It's not relevant to my job. And they're wrong. It's going away. We're going to see these get closer and closer together, right? So if you're someone who did a little bit of HTML and CSS and you're like, this seems interesting, if it says that on the job description, apply for it and just be honest about it. When they ask you about how much you know, say, well, I don't know, how much do you need? I built this shitty web page for my dog, right? I know how images work. I've made some colors different. Is that right? And just tell them, because there's, I mean, the front end development job can go so deep now with Angular and React. There's so many things. Just tell them what you know and see from there if that actually works. So let's start making a user flow. Now that we have an idea of what jobs exist out here, what we want to do is start visualizing your steps to employment and the necessary deliverables at each step. Sorry, this is a task flow, not a user flow. I titled this wrong. Sorry. So here's the normal task flow for applying for a job. You network, and this one's optional. Sometimes it's not networking, sometimes it's a cold call, right? You submit an application. Generally speaking, this is not every job, there's not a rule to this, but what I tend to see when I talk to students who are interviewing, there's a phone screen, there's a design challenge, there's an in-person interview, and then some sort of acceptance/negotiation period. Now, each step requires deliverables and skills to convince your future employer that you're worth their time, okay? So when you're networking, that's communication and self-confidence. When it's submitting an application, it's all about the paper. Do you look good on your resume and on your portfolio? When it comes to your phone screen, it's about storytelling and communicating. Are you able to express your story and communicate it properly? The design challenge is going to be about problem solving and technical skill. The in-person interview is industry knowledge, communication, and determination, which I'll explain in a second where that factors in. And then acceptance and negotiation comes down to self-confidence and cake acquisition. Those who have taken my class know my classic tagline of ask for the cake. For those of you who have not joined me here, let me recount this to you. So I had a student a few years ago, and she was powerful and strong. And a lot of the students kind of teased her and made fun of her because she was very masculine presenting. She was very bold and assertive and sometimes a bit obnoxious, I'll admit, right? But this woman was powerful. And I could feel my class didn't understand like how great she was. They weren't able to see what she was capable of, right? So one day I'm in the office and it's all glass windows in the GA office in Denver. And there, it's Mackie's birthday, and she's our marketing person. And Nicole, our career coach at the time, she's baked Mackie a cake. But because so much of our work is remote, there's only 3 of us in the office. So we have this whole cake, we each eat a slice, and we're looking at this full Pac-Man left of a cake, a huge amount of cake. And we're doing the thing that we like to do. We're like, don't send it home with me. No, I'll eat it all tonight. No, I don't want to take it. No, you, Mackie, it's your birthday. You take it. Well, I know. Well, your roommate could eat it. And we're doing that whole thing, trying to pass the cake to someone. And meanwhile, I'm not aware, but my students are coming back from lunch and they're walking by the office and looking in the window. They're going, Nick has a cake in there. Why does Nick have a cake? He has a whole cake in there. Is the cake for us? Is it our cake? And they're all going to the classroom, just standing around, just like, I don't know. Well, I mean, he would tell us if there was a cake. And this student, she just stands up and says, I'll find out about the cake. And so she walks to the office. She opens the door, doesn't knock. That wasn't her style. She just walks in. We're like, hey, how's it going? You're supposed to knock. And she's like, hey, what's the deal with that cake? We're like, well, it's Mackie's birthday and Nicole baked it for her. And she's like, you gonna eat that cake? We're like, well, no, we were actually just talking about it. She's like, can I have that cake? We're like, yeah, if you want the cake, you can have the cake. So she took the cake. She walked to the kitchen, got a single fork out of the drawer, walked back and started eating that fucking cake in front of everyone there in the classroom, right? She did eventually share. But anytime someone was like, oh, this girl, she's a little too much, she's big. I'm like, do you guys remember when she ate an entire birthday cake? Because she was the only person brave enough to ask for that fucking cake, right? I want y'all to ask for that fucking cake, right? What is the worst that was going to happen? You'd be like, no, go back to the classroom and knock next time. What are you doing? She would leave and be like, what is wrong with her? God, she's, whatever. I wasn't going to fail her. I wasn't going to kick her out of the class. All I was going to be is like, man, she is strange. She is very assertive. And sometimes it's a little overbearing. Sometimes it's bothering me, right? But at the end of the day, she got that fucking cake because we didn't want it, right? So I want you guys to get used to this idea of asking for that cake and figuring out how many people just don't care about the cake. All right, so when it comes to this general task flow, I've built a spreadsheet. Don't worry, I'm gonna share it in the chat. I'll make sure you guys have it. This is my overall spreadsheet, and I'll show you guys later. I have a student, and I see her there. Hi, Emily Ann. Who is going to go through her version with me. She made a slightly different version. It doesn't matter, make it work for you. But this is my template, all right? So what I have is the list of companies, and then I always paste in whatever that job description is. The source, where did you find it? Because it is important to distinguish whether you got it through networking, a personal connection, or like the internet randomly. And then what day you applied. And then you have a series of progressive columns. This will change, definitely, depending on the job. But you have your response, whether you got one or not, first interview, design challenge, second interview, offer. This might be second, third, fourth, fifth interview, but you get the idea, right? If we make a job tracker like this, you know what we're doing? We're doing user research. We are basically tracking the research of what is happening. And depending on where these lines end, I can tell you what is wrong with your job search. For instance, if all of them die in the response phase, that means going back to the task flow, we have an issue with the resume and the portfolio. If no one is writing back to you whatsoever, not even like nice rejections or maybe a few rejections, that means that you don't look good on paper. This happens a lot to my students that are very young, who have not had a lot of experience. It happens to my students that thought, well, I'll just attach the Figma file and it'll be fine on my portfolio. They didn't write full case studies. They didn't explain their work. And so people look at it compared to others and they say, it's not the same. It's not as good. So that's how we know we have a on paper problem. If you are constantly getting rejected at the first interview, The fuck are you saying to them? Like, what is happening? What are you wearing pants? Like, what's happening, right? So now what we need to do is talk about your storytelling and your communication. And this is where we start to see, and even in the last one, we see a lot of biases and unconscious biases come up. So are you good at speaking English and writing in English, right? If English is not your first language, that can be a huge blocker for you, right? If you are a shy person who does not want to talk about your work and you're a little too modest, this is going to come up in that first interview thing. And we need to work on that, how to tell your story and communicate a little bit more effectively so that people start to trust you. Somewhere along the line, you're then going to get a design challenge, right? And this is super stressful. It's also inordinately taxing on people like me that has children at home. So it used to be in my 20s, they give me a design challenge and say, oh, don't spend more than 12 hours on it. Like just spend the week on it and send it back. Motherfucker, if I had a week, you know what I would do? I would take a nap. I would take a nap for an entire week. But the minute this talk is done, I'm going to go upstairs and apologize to my wife for having an event tonight, and then put the girls down, help bathe them, and then eat dinner out of the sink like a fucking animal, and then fall asleep for as long as I can until I'm needed again, until my toddler's cold, icy hand reaches onto my back again at 3 a.m, okay? I don't have time for a design challenge. So that's fucked up, that's even a thing, right? But the point is that if you are consistently failing design challenges, we need to work on is problem solving and technical skill, figuring out what are you missing. A lot of times these design challenges, and I will say that especially in the time of COVID, I'm happy to say whiteboard challenges are disappearing. We don't care about them anymore. Maybe we'll never go back. That'd be wonderful. No one designs on the spot. That's stupid, right? But the idea of being given a challenge as a PDF or a Figma file, that's going to persist, right? So being able to work with what they have. I could teach an entire lesson on this. The main idea here is that you need to understand what they're asking for. And a lot of times you get so freaked out about how do I make it pretty? How do I make it perfect? That you miss red herrings, you miss actual acts, you turn in stuff that they're not asking for, right? So that's what we'd work on there. If we're still getting second interview rejections, I have great news. You're doing wonderful. And this is what's really hard to understand, is that if you are consistently getting very far in the interview list, you're getting past response, 1 to 2 interviews, some sort of technical challenge, and still being turned down, that is as good as it fucking gets, right? If you're being told, oh, you know what, we really liked you, but we went with this other candidate that was slightly more experienced or slightly more this or that, it doesn't get better than that. There is no perfecting that. What you are in now is the role of subjectivity. You have reached the point where you have made it to the final round with everyone else, and you are being chosen, or sorry, you're being not chosen because of individual tiny little things you can't control. You applied for a healthcare job and the other applicant had experience working in healthcare. You applied for a senior role, and even though you're super talented, this other person had 3 more years on their resume, right? That is just the luck of the draw. And that is where it just kind of ends. You just keep going at this point. I'm talking to a student right now from my last class. He had 2 interviews this week and he has 3 more lined up for next week. I'm like, nice, keep going. You might get turned down from all of them. It doesn't matter. Right now, you are doing so good practicing. You're getting all the work out there that you can. Your stories are becoming second nature. You're getting bored with interviewing. It's like, it's not even an event anymore. You don't put on a tie for it anymore. You're just like, another interview. Yes, that is exactly the vibe we want to hit, where you're just like so saturated with that feeling that you're like, I'll just keep going. And that's where lightning strikes. If you let that part get you down because you keep being second place, that's a good way to ruin that hot streak and go back down to the response level, right? What you need to do is when you are at that point, and I know it's the most engrossing, it's the hardest, it takes the most amount of your time, moment by moment, that is the point where you ramp up because you are so fucking close to landing that job. It's just about now finding that right place. So now that we have a way of gathering data, let's move on to actionable steps to improve each section. Let's talk about weekly goals. Y'all know Dungeons and Dragons? Is it just harmless fun or is it sorcery? And if you don't care, did you know that Joe Manganiello likes it and he's hot? And so maybe you should pay attention to this. This is my bait to get you guys to pay attention to Dungeons and Dragons. He literally has the Gary Gygax Memorial Dungeon in his basement. He's fucking hot, okay? So maybe there's some validity to it, all right? Follow me here, okay? So in Dungeons and Dragons, if you decide you want to attack someone and you don't have a weapon, it's called an unarmed strike. And you are going to roll a 1d4. These are really great for stepping on. They're worse than Legos. What it's going to do is between 1 and 4 damage. That means that the average roll of a 1d4 is going to be 2.5. Now, this is troubling because a large monstrosity, which is the general classification I've given to a UX job, is going to have an HP of 20, meaning you're going to have to hit it around 5 to 6 times before you're able to hit it. It's not great. But here's the deal. Dungeons and Dragons is about leveling up. Once you get a basic sword, that's a 2d4. You have 2 dice in your hands, and now the average is 5. Once you get a Warsaw, that's very cool. That's an average of 7.5. You get a Cloud of Daggers, you get 4 dice. That's an average of 10. Vitriolic Spear, which is some hardcore magic, that's a 5d4 attack, and that's a 12.5 average. In just a little amount of time, we went from this grandma just punching shit for no reason to a fucking sphere of dark magic, right? This is exactly kind of how your UX journey goes. Bear with me here. Put another picture of them shirtless in here just to like get you all back on. Okay, cool. All right, let's keep going. The point I'm trying to make is that you may be a wizard now, a UX wizard, but you're a shitty one. You're a very bad wizard. You're still doing one art strikes. You're like, I know UX, and it's not very good. Okay, we got you to the point where it's fine. You graduated, you know your patterns. It's not great yet though, but you have the ability to level up. I think this is the main problem is y'all a lot of times view the end of your class as the end of your experience. It's not, it's the beginning. That's like the cold open, credits roll, we're starting. Now you're a UX designer, right? But luckily, every time you practice UX, network, or something else, you are adding more dice to your roll, okay? There are a lot of things that upgrade your dice roll, that give you more dice in your hand to throw at fucking monsters, all right? Finishing a design project or doing some daily UI work, finishing a case study, attending a networking event, writing a blog post about a UX project, posting more work, trying out a new style, learning new software, investing in an interesting UI trend, or reading or listening to a design book and or podcast, all of those things level up your character and put more dice in your hand. So here's the basic project workflow for my RPG nerds. We have conceive idea, complete project, write about it. Listen, completing it is not enough. Thinking about it is not enough. It's when you actually write about what you did and post it either in a blog or on your website, that's when you level up. And then you can post the project and write up and use that project in the job hunt, okay? What I've specifically designed in GA's curriculum is that we have a certain number of projects. We have 6 total, and each of them hit a different piece. So the first project is you designing one app for one person. Second project is e-commerce, so you learn buying patterns, and you do it for multiple people. You're doing it for an entire audience. Then you move on to a group project for an existing brand where you learn how to design a mobile app using iOS HIG or material design for many people with many people, because it's harder to do it with many people than just by yourself. Then you do a perfect dev deliverable, so you know how to hand off a project. Then you work with a client. Then you do a passion project, right? Because I'm hitting mobile, desktop, many users, one users, alone, in a team. I'm trying to get you as much experience as possible. But the fact is that at the end of the day, there's more stuff to uncover. So you have to find other work to do. If you do this enough, week after week, and I'm not expecting you to do every project within a week, you're not still in school, right? But eventually you're going to be adding more and more dice to your hand to the point that after 9 weeks, you have an average roll of 9d4, 22 hit points. That is a one-hit kill on a large monstrosity. To put this into more relatable terms, I know it's hard to go out into the job field when your last job was at Jamba Juice and you're 20 years old and you've done 3 months of training and you did a bunch of fake projects and one project for a local nonprofit, right? That looks like shit. I know that. I know that you guys go out there being like, hey, look at me, I made a thing. And it feels stupid doing that, right? But if you can do another project and another project and another project, eventually get to the point where they say, wow, 3 months experience, but look at this, right? The more you can show them, the more it is easier to convince them that, like, I know that I don't have time on my side. Time's a flat circle, it doesn't matter. I know I don't have time on my side, but look at all the shit that I did. I make mobile websites, I make e-commerce, I help this nonprofit, I redesigned the Rocket League waiting lounge and this video game that I hate, right? Like, I did all of these things. And the more you practice and the more you show you're practicing, the harder it is to disregard someone as like not being a real designer. So how are you going to pick your next big project? If you're doing nothing right now, well, I got news. We're going to do something. We're going to learn some new things that we can do. All right. So my first choice, what I want every student to do is to come to our graduation blood ritual, in which their dark arts are performed. I'm not allowed to discuss at liberty here. We perform our dark rituals. You go to bed, you wash off the blood in the shower, and the next morning you start your W-2 job full-time, right? That happens to maybe one person per cohort. Every once in a while, I do have one student who magically gets a job lined up before they graduate. I'm looking at you, Trevor. I know. You can have some shit lined up. I got you. Occasionally, we have one student who gets something lined up ahead of time before they graduate. But most of y'all will not be that lucky, right? So if you can't do that, you're going to pick up some part-time contract work. This is going to be a common post-grad scenario. You're going to find someone to pay you for 10 to 30 hours a week. Many of these jobs can turn into full-time work. In fact, the most common pattern is we have a 3-month contract to hire. Like I've said, craft-based skills, they're difficult. You got to test a person out and see what they're doing, right? And so the most common hiring pattern that I see with my students is they get hired for a contract to hire position at a okay hourly rate, $35, $45, $55 an hour, somewhere in there. And they say, if you do a good job, then in 3 months, you will be converted to a full-time employee, right? And that happens about 80 to 90% of the time. Generally, it's not even competitive. They're just like, we like you, we want to hire you. We're going to test you out hourly first. And if that works after 3 months, you'll get hired. So look for that part-time work, especially for small startups, because those places grow. Hopefully, if they're doing what they are designed to do, they will grow and eventually have time to actually hire or have the money to hire you full-time. If you can't do that, if you're not starting a full-time or part-time paid job, you're going to find volunteer UX work for a worthy cause. If you're going to work unpaid, you might as well do it for a real company that cannot afford you. That is a very important piece, right? So this is time to work for nonprofits, political action committees, social justice, your friends starting their Etsy line of jewelry. I don't care, whatever that is. Find something that you think these people deserve good design work, and they're not able to pay for it, but if I do it, they will post it, right? This is great because you get to put on your resume that you are working as a freelance designer for X or Y company, right? You don't have to say, by the way, I was not paid, or the compensation was a steady rate of $0 per hour, but they bought me lunch one time, right? All you have to say is, I'm doing work that is being used by a real business, and that is so effective to say that, right? Also, these places that can't pay you, they fucking love you. They love that you are working for them, right? They will write you reviews on LinkedIn. They will brag about you on their blog. They will introduce you to every donor they know. They are just so happy to have someone helping them that they will do whatever it takes. Little startups, mid-sized companies, they're not that generous because they're trying to make money. They're trying to guard their reputation. But some nonprofit would just love to brag about you and help you find someone. If that can't happen, then you just make up a project on your own, anything. Redesign another e-commerce site. Practice anything you did in school. Make a full app build for Dog Finder. This is something we do. My students to teach in Figma, we make an app for finding dogs to pet. Just find local dogs and pet them on the head. That's the whole premise. It doesn't make sense. You can't GPS track dogs. It doesn't make sense. But the point is that they're practicing. They're building it out piece by piece, right? You can redesign a video game menu. One of my favorite, these are a few of some of my favorite not off-brand, but just like unusual UX case studies of the year. So, and in my gamers out there, Cyberpunk 2077 came out earlier this year. It was terrible. It was so poorly created that they issued everyone refunds and apologized for even making the game. It was a disaster. And of all the things that someone could take apart, someone did an accessibility study of the heads-up display and how the color is not only not WCAG accessible for the disabled, but also misleading because of the color combinations. Over all the fucking problems in this game, this is the lowest hanging fruit. And this person did such a smart, thoughtful takedown of what's wrong with UI that I teach this in my class because I'm just like, this is why color theory matters. I know that there's a million other things to complain about this game, but this part, like, it was so easy to not fuck up and they still fucked it up. Or one of my favorite case studies of all time, Katy Teardrick, she redesigned the scare floor in Monsters, Inc. You guys have seen Monsters, Inc. recently. There's a hilarious scene, a real madcap situation where they're trying to go to the scare floor and then they run a thing through it and everybody trips and falls. It's a classic Pixar goof, just everybody everywhere. And this person watching it paused it and they're like, well, why is it designed this way? Could we design it better? See, the problem is that the scare staging area is like literally where all of the work goes. Couldn't we figure out a way to better organize this? And they literally break down. So waste and empty space where everything is moved, also where people do hazardous work. It's not OSHA compliant when you break down this Monsters Inc. scare floor. And so they redesign it specifically to make it a little bit better. This is the most batshit insane case study I've ever read, that someone would take the time to pause Monsters Inc. and redesign the scare floor. But this is some of the best problem solving I've seen. This is incredible, right? Find a problem and fix it. That's all it comes down to. Find a problem somewhere and fix it. If you've been in my class, you've heard me rant about Einstein Brothers bagels. It's like they don't want you to have the bagels. Why is the line set up that way? Why do they try and throw you the bagel over the fucking overreach where people were lined up? It doesn't make any sense. It almost had to have been designed masochistically by someone who hates bagels. It doesn't make any sense to me, okay? I would happily write a case study when I don't have 2 children that need me all the time about why Einstein Brothers is the worst situation for purchasing a bagel, right? Find a problem and fix it. Now, you do not work for free for a company that can pay you. This is a rule, right? You will not take equity in lieu of payment. That sucks. Maybe when you are making 6-7 figures a year and you're comfortable and you want to take a risk on a startup you believe in, sure, take equity as payment. Not when you are living in a 1-bedroom apartment making $30,000 a year. This is not the time to invest in some tech bros idiot idea of like the new social network for dogs. This is not the time to do this, okay? You are not going to accept asynchronous deferred payment plans. I've literally had students presented with this. And I'm like, so you're broke is what you're saying. An asynchronous payment deferment plan means we're not going to fucking pay you. We don't have any money, right? You're not going to take an unpaid internship at Google or Twitter. Repeat after me, fuck you, pay me. We're not going to work for free. When you work for free, not only do you lose, you set the precedent to other people that designers work for free, that what we do isn't valuable. It ruins everyone, right? It especially affects women and minorities who are getting paid less to begin with. So we're not going to work for free no matter how desperate we are, because fuck you, pay me. We deserve money for the craft we spent years cultivating. So what other things would make you a better designer? Well, you could sign up for daily UI and do one every day. If you were in my class every other day, we did a daily UI, but you can easily double the amount you do by signing up for it to email you daily. You can set aside time to ready or read design articles, right? I use Pocket when I see something interesting and I don't have time to use it. I hit my little Firefox extension, save it to Pocket, and then when I am like live action role playing Octonauts with my daughter for like the 80th time and she doesn't need me for a mission, I can read that in the corner while I'm waiting, right? Learn some new software, try it out. Try learning a new visual style, technique, approach, etc. Like make something really gothy and like really weak, like really alternative, or make something that's like total like pastels, fluffy, super soft, like just to like try out different styles. Pick up a design adjacent hobby, photography, calligraphy. The classically quoted anecdote is that the reason that Mac OS had different typography, different fonts in it, is because Steve Jobs took a calligraphy class and he learned the difference of typography. So he's like, this is important. People should be able to read, right? I love picking up hobbies. I've been 3D printing. That's been a huge thing for me. So designing in 3D and then printing that, prototyping it, trying things out. That's what I've been really obsessed with lately. I'm really into markers. I love drawing and illustrating. I'm terrible at it, but I love drawing. I love the way color is like subtractive when you're doing it on paper. Like I love all those things, right? So find something weird that you're into that's design adjacent and practice that. And then practice design challenges with your peers. I still have students who meet up in like former groups, like people that they were friends with in their class, and practice design challenges, do whiteboard challenges, read each other's case studies, proofread. Find some people that are like your pack, and Rome is like pack animals, right? Go to meetups together and be each other's wingmans. Like just do what you need to do to get out there. So here's what some of my other students have done. I have a couple of students. One's just a straight up UX designer, one's an illustrator, and they both have wonderful Instagrams where they just post daily, semi-daily, every few days of what they're working on. Doesn't have to be good. It's just some of their work. And it's one more thing they can link to, because when you look at someone, you say, well, they have 3 months experience. Is that really a lot, right? So here, Erin has 30-minute design challenges listed literally in her bio. And when they look at that, they're like, wow, 27 posts. Okay, they've done 30, almost 30 different styles. It starts to add to that body. That's more dice in your hand, right? It starts to really feel like maybe they have done more work. I have a student, Stephen Winkelstein. He was a children's author before he came and took my class. And so he has used that to write a lot of UX articles that are now being published by UX Collective. So sort of his side hustle is getting his articles published. And then when he goes to look for another job, he can be like, yeah, here's my UX work. Here's what I've written about UX work. It's been published by all these companies, right? So any adjacent skill adds on to that. Molly Hodson from UXDI 16. She has been doing a great job of, or no, she's 17, sorry, of posting all of her daily UIs on Dribble, just another place for her to collect all those pieces and post them. All right, let's talk about daily goals. You deserve a break after you graduate. Now get up. We gotta structure your days. We gotta figure out what you're gonna do day after day. Otherwise, you're Fat Thor again. All right, we need to figure out how to structure your days. So, as much as you can, pretend like you're still in school. Now, not entirely. I know that my students are exhausted, rightfully, after days and weeks and months of working, but you need to maintain momentum. If you were going 90 miles an hour before, let's not go to 0, let's go to 60, 50, let's compromise somewhere and still have you moving forward at a general pace. So how did you change your habits to adapt being in school? Everybody had to change in some way. Here's some ideas. A lot of y'all had mandatory bedtimes. You would like a begin work ritual, or you'd get up, have a cup of coffee, get online. Some sort of relative structure to your day, or an end of day time where you say, and this is now when I'm done and I get to relax, have a beer, whatever that is. It's hard to stay motivated in a vacuum. So maybe your peers can help. Reach out to your classmates or other UX newbies and plan events like daily stand-ups. I have some students from my last class who literally still at 9 a.m. every morning do a stand-up, get on Zoom together. And a lot of times it's just complaining about not having a job, right? But it forces them to be sitting down in front of their computer with Figma open every day at 9 a.m., fresh cup of coffee, and they start their day that way, even if they have nothing to report from what they were doing. Design challenges, practice as a group. Network wingmanning. Oh, Jesus. Network wingmanning. Go to groups together. Go out in public together and meet people. Portfolio reviews. Look at that. Each other's portfolios together. Happy hour event sessions. Dark rituals and sacrifices to increase the chance of success. Listen, whatever works, figure out something. It's fine. My student Delaney, who was later my instructional associate, created 3 buckets to apply to. Each day, the things you need to do need to fall into 3 buckets: applying, networking, and skill building, right? So this one's fairly obvious. Keep applying to jobs. But remember, if this is all you do, you will not find a job. Next is networking. No one likes networking. I've had like 3 students in the last 5 years that like networking, and they're weird. It's not what we like to do, right? But it does work. Virtual meetups, hit up strangers for coffee, embarrass yourself, and remember that no one will remember you. Either they will hire you or they'll be like, who's that weird person that spilled coffee on you that one time and then asked you for a job? That was weird. They're not going to remember you. You can apply a month later. They're not going to remember your face. And then work on something, anything. Just keep working. See that previous section. Pick a project and go. There is nothing worse than me hearing a student and I say, what have you been working on? They're like, oh man, I haven't opened Figma in months. I'm like, well, first of all, you're going to have a bunch of updates, right? It's going to take like 3 hours to get it running again. And also, are you going to read all the change log? Are you going to see what's changed in your industry since you quit? Like, to me, that's the answer is you quit. Like, don't do that. Keep working. In terms of your daily schedule, you can be a bit more lax now, but try to establish some kind of daily routine that rolls into a weekly goal. This is basically sprint planning. What are you doing this week? What is your goal? So I had my students fill out a job tracker plan for like what they wanted to do each day, right? So in this case, we had like the days of the week of the next like 3 months of what are you doing, right? And so this student, they took a couple of days off. I think Tuesday was their birthday. That's why they're celebrating there, right? And then they decided Wednesdays is applying for jobs and attending a networking event. Thursday is 2 jobs and a passion project time. Friday is 2 jobs and a networking event. Monday is 2 jobs and passion project, right? So they're going back and forth. And on Tuesdays, they're mostly out, but they do a GA meeting every once in a while, right? That's fine. Or this is what another student did. Oh yeah, Tuesday was graduation day. That's why it has that. All right, cool. This person said every day is going to be the same, but every day has parts to it. At least one day on 1 hour on job searching, at least 1 hour on portfolio passion project. And I think there's more down here. So they had taken each day and said, I'm going to do this each and every day. Or this person did it by the day. Monday's always portfolio. Tuesday's job applications. They're going to Michigan apparently. Wednesday it's learning and application. Thursday is networking. Friday is passion and portfolio. Cool. I love that. Pick a plan. And I don't expect you to adhere to it 100%, but have some sort of idea of what you're trying to do. All right. Eventually you're going to want to give up. So when you started school, you started here in that uninformed optimism. This is the emotional cycle of change, right? It starts with uninformed optimism. I love day one teaching UX because y'all are so fucking confused. You don't know what's going on. You show up on Zoom or in class wearing like what you think an artist wears. Some of you are like wearing berets or stripes or whatever, or like dress to the nines. Some of you dress up like in a suit and tie because you're like, this is business. And it's always funny because it's a total shit show, right? My favorite thing to do is for a while I was keeping track of what everybody brought as a backpack the first day, because we have folks that are like, you know, I'm in Denver. So we have people who like bring hiking backpacks because they realized the day before, they're like, I don't have a backpack. I haven't had a backpack since I was in high school. And so they put on like a fucking backpack with like rails in it and stuff to like carry skis or something and put in like one notebook. Some of y'all bring like a purse or a tote bag. My favorite though, I had a student show up with just a King Soopers bag with several sheets of paper and a pen in it. And I'm like, we're going to watch him. That is fucking chaos mode right there. Just a King Soopers bag with a single pen in it. That's fucking unreal, right? So you all start there. You're so excited. I'm going to be an artist. I'm going to be great. And then the more I teach you, the more you go down into here into informed pessimism. You're like, oh, there's a lot of buttons on Figma. What am I going to do, right? And you get down to this point of determination or Figma, or determination or giving up. Every day after until you find a job is mostly in the spot. And every day you have an easy option to give up. You're not getting paid already, and eventually you're going to get adjusted to that, unless you're going to die soon, in which case that's a whole different thing, right? But eventually you get used to being unemployed, however uncomfortable that is, and you just kind of stay there. And you're like, ah, shit, right? And every day you're like, man, my fucking PlayStation's right there. Or, man, you know, Karen called me. She wants to go out. That'd be so fun. I want to go out with my friends again. And it's so easy to give up, but you can't fucking give up. That is the only case I have where students don't get jobs. I've had students take 1.5 years to get a job. They still get a job unless they give up. And I've had students give up after 1 year. I've had students give up after 1 month, right? All of them can make it there if they keep going. So what are you going to do about this? You're going to find a way to keep getting better, meet and network with people who have been in your shoes, track your progress so you know what to work on? Or are you going to give up and disappoint Nick Offerman? You guys want to disappoint Nick Offerman? Let me show this video to you so you don't disappoint him. Show this out. There's no embed. You got to go to the Inc. website. It's the only way to do it.
People who I would say were the most talented people I've known didn't make it. Their patience was not up to snuff. People who I would say were the most talented people I've known didn't make it. Their patience
Shouldn't have turned off the captions. Didn't like that. They will watch it smaller. That sometimes works. Let's just refresh this whole page. Let's try that.
the most talented people I've known didn't make it. Their patience was not up to snuff.
Wow. Does not want us to watch this video. We're almost there.
Snuff. And so they would find some other fruitful way to live their lives without depending on the fickle bitch that is show business. Patience. steadfast despite opposition, difficulty, or adversity. I was aware that I wasn't a superstar out of the womb. I wasn't born in a top hat and tap shoes. There was those couple of dark years, and a large answer to the question of what was the source of my patience was that I determined if I was going to stick it out in showbiz, I was going to work hard to make my life enjoyable without depending on the successes or failures of show business. I had my wood shop, and I was working as an actor. I was making sure that I was rich and living like a king, no matter what my paycheck said. I think I was 38 when I got the job on Parks and Rec. The creators of the show, Mike Schur and Greg Daniels, they told NBC they wanted me, and NBC said no. And they made them look at hundreds of other actors for 5 months. And finally, after 5 months, NBC said, okay, we'll let you cast this guy. The thing is, by then, I had tricked myself into happiness and peacefulness and a life of patience. And so I think I would not have gotten the job if I had not had that peace that I had achieved anyway. I think that people can achieve great things without patience. Some people are great at age 14. They become the biggest pop star on the planet. I would not wish that upon my worst enemy. If you're lucky enough to achieve greatness, I hope that it includes a lot of patience, because it really ups your chances of surviving and perhaps perpetuating the greatness.
All right, so if you had to wait years to become Ron Swanson, what's your fucking problem? It's gonna take some time. It's gonna get there eventually though, okay? So that's the main thrust of what I wanted to talk about. It seems like there's a couple of questions in the chat that I want to talk about. So one of them came up is, if the job asks for knowledge of HTML, CSS, JavaScript, etc., and you currently don't have that knowledge, should I still apply? That's a great question. Do you want to do those things? And if you don't know the answer to that, then don't apply, right? So what I would say is, since, and this is just blanket advice for everybody, HTML and CSS are things that are going to come up more and more in what you design. JavaScript and jQuery to a degree. To be clear, I talked to some UX engineers at Google, and they don't write code at all. So you don't necessarily have to write code to be a UX engineer, which is baffling to me. I don't know what they do day to day, right? But if you want to say that you can do these things, then, or apply to these jobs rather, then practice them a little bit. There's so many like Code Academy, free online resources, Khan Academy, where you can take some HTML, CSS classes. And I think the first thing you'd want to do is ask your, do those things and ask yourself, did I even slightly enjoy that? Was that something that I could see myself doing? If the answer is yes, then start applying to those jobs and keep practicing. That's the main thing, right? If you do that and you're like, oh boy, that was very hard and I don't like learning this on my own, then probably not, right? And then for how do you find contract work? You're going to find it, and I thank you, Eugenia, for putting in a link there. But what you're going to be doing is basically applying for jobs. You're going to find tons of jobs on any job board that are contract based. The other thing is, don't underestimate just cold calling and reaching out to places to see if they need work. For instance, when the COVID first hit, I was teaching a class that just started right as we're getting shut down, and they were looking for client projects. And I said, well, reach out to any restaurant, any local restaurant, and see if they have a plan for like ordering online and delivery. A lot of them wanted to do that, but none of them had like websites that accompanied that, right? So when you see that there's a UX need somewhere, reach out and see if they need help. More than often, I mean, that's how I find client projects for my students, is I reach out and say, hey, your shit sucks. Like, do you want help? And most of the time they say yes. I say it nicer than that, right? But the general idea is like, you reach out to people and say like, do you need help? And a lot of times they say yes. So I would say all the same main channels, but don't look over just reaching out to people, cold calling and saying like, do you need help with this thing? That always tends to work for me. So I want to open this up for any questions y'all have. You can put them in the chat if there's any questions. And while I'm waiting for that, what I want to do is look at Emily Ann's job tracker. Hi, Emily Ann. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, happy to be here.
Hey, great. You guys can still see my screen? All right. Now I'm going to do a little bit of like some Miss Cleo shit and like try and read the tea leaves in your job tracker and see what's going on. So what we have here, let me just make sure I understand the format. We have all the places you've reached out to, and we can see that we've gotten to application responses. We have a few phone screens, and then technical screens. That's kind of where we're stuck at, right? That's as far as we get.
Yes.
All right. Do you want to tell me anything going into this, like feelings and vibes that you're getting so far?
Yeah, I think the two things that seem to be tripping me up is like portfolio not being like comprehensive enough. So I actually did a bit of work on that over the last couple of weeks.
Okay.
And then also, I think I'm still bad at talking about my work.
Okay. And I mean, that does seem to be where we're at right now. So when it comes to application response, I'm assuming these blank spots are you never heard anything from anyone.
Yeah.
So after a while, we can say that's probably a no, right? So these are more than a month out. So I would say these are no. Recruiter followed up after an employee. I know highlighted my app. Okay, cool. So that's a personal connection. And this one you got in right away. And interested in hiring bootcamp grants, talked through research, ran out of time to demonstrate prototype. Okay. All right. So you just didn't hear back from that one. All right. This person's going to get back to you. That was over a month ago, though. Are you following up with these when you see this?
If it's pink, that means I heard back and it was a no.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. No, denied. Cool. All right. So what I'm seeing here is a whole lot, though. It looks like as we go, we start to see a little bit of forward momentum here. We're very much stuck in the application response area, which to me, that kind of points to how you look on paper. But let's see, Emily, I'm going to this wedding later. What is your website again, Emily Ann?
Yeah, Emily Ann and Salles, SALLES.com.
Okay, there we go.
Yep.
All right. All right. So, I mean, my general feeling here, I'm like, okay, this looks real. Portfolio, this looks nice. And this is fairly recent. You redid a whole bunch of this, right?
Yeah, I added one more case study and one more case study placeholder.
Okay, cool. So you doubled the amount of work on your homepage. That's huge. Just to say I have twice as much information here. And you have a background in not only writing, but also project management, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I've read through your case studies, they've been really good. I've been able to check those. Because I didn't make that clear. Emily Ann is a former student of mine, but she's been out, 2 months?
Yeah.
2 months now. Okay, so your case studies, when I read them, they are good, right? And they're getting better too. I think that a lot of the times what we see is our first ones, like this works, but it's still like, it's a pretty easy way of transforming this information. You have this that I can't really read and it's a little bit blurry, but you are giving me a few pieces. It's a little bit small, like I want to see it bolder and bigger, but you're doing a good job of transforming your personas and making them like ready for web. The last one you sent me, I just want to go grab that one real quick because it was so good. I saved it so I could.
I think it was that Wondernauts one.
Okay, that's right. I was like, wait, it wasn't an app, but it was an app. Okay, so this is so good. I bookmarked it so I can show my current students. Right, this to me really, for me, it pushed outside of what you had been doing in class, and it was the first time I saw your work. I'm like, that is talking about it correctly, right? So what I would do, just my first recommendation, is let's move this one up to the top left of your possible projects. So what we have right now, which is this is normal for like WordPress and Wix and a lot of these things. I don't know why it's not going back. Let me go back to your homepage here. Is that it's doing them in the order. So this is the new placeholder, right?
So it's actually random. Every time
Every
time the page reloads, it'll reorder them. Which I don't know how to not make.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can we disable that? So like the top left one, I always assume that's like the one you're most proud of, right? And the problem here is like post grad, every case study you write is like twice as good as the last one, right? And this Wondernauts one, which I just want to brag on my student real quick, she did this with Adobe for NASA. It was an amazing Creative Jam project that she did. Very proud of her for this, but there's so much, and for what was essentially a hackathon, you have so much good information here. I know you're working on a team, but the use of illustration, the way you explain it, I think this is such an amazing case study, how you go through each piece by piece. I know it's short, but it does exactly what I want it to. I love it. So this is what we're kind of aiming for. The other thing too is that you can tell by this point you're comfortable with the layout of the website builder you've chosen, right? You seem good building these things. There's not weird, awkward spacing between them. It just feels straight to it, right? So a lot of people come to me where Emily Ann is at, and they're like, okay, so I should go back and do my other case studies like that? No. What I want Emily Ann to do is to make more work and keep moving forward with it. I want you to take on something that's going to take you 2 to 3 weeks, something like another hackathon, or if you have to, make it up, and then write a new case study about it, because you are going to do better the next time you write it, right? And what I want to do is if this has to remain random and we're literally playing Russian roulette with your projects, I want so many of them to be newer and fresher that it's the likelihood of them clicking on a placeholder or an older project goes down and down and down. And then when you get to about 6 projects, when you add a new one, you take an old one off. And that is what a feeling to be able to remove older work, right? Or declassify it a little bit, like put it down as like a smaller piece somewhere where you're like not promoting it as much. Let it be a shorter case study, just purely visual. So that's what I would say there. I think that the more you interview with this portfolio, now that you have newer pieces, the better response you're going to get. But I think what I've said here is like, there is a difference between your older work and your, not even your older work, your older case studies and your newer case studies. That's what sticks out to me right now. So getting that all into that par and eventually replacing some of these older ones, that's what I would do there. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, like, it looks like the case studies are getting better over time. That's the right direction.
Yes. And that is exactly what I expect. I think that, yeah, I think you're definitely going in the right direction. Definitely right here, it seems like you are occasionally poking through. And what I think is that there are people who are spending more time on your case studies, really absorbing that content, really going through it. But a lot of times, especially larger companies, they're not taking that time. Sadly, a lot of them are going with the ones that are the most polished and look the best, regardless of whether the thinking in them is actually representative of what the users need, right? I think the stat is like they spend between 6 and 30 seconds on your case studies. Yet any paragraph they read has to be fucking perfect, right? It's a very hard game to play. But the more you have better, more recent case studies, the easier it's going to be.
Cool.
Thank you, Emily Ann. Thank you for being vulnerable and bringing us your chart here. I'll take the screen off of it so people aren't just staring at your notes there.
Thanks for the read.
Hey, of course, and we can talk more because Emily Ann is actually joining me as an instructional associate for my current class. I have about 5 weeks left. She's going to be joining me, so we'll do some more mentorship and talk about what you're working on. All right, I'm going to move.
To it.
Yes, me too. I'm going to move to some of the questions we have here. So with regard to position requirements, aside from mostly ignoring required years of experience, are there any other requirements that hiring managers may be more willing to let slide if the person doesn't meet them? Yes. And how do you know? I don't know. All right. So I'll give you an example from the other side of the table. When I was working at a job, I was working as a developer at this particular job with a little bit of UX engineering built into it. And we were getting more and more contracts in. And so I said, we need a new JavaScript developer. I'm going to use my network to find someone that I know and trust. And because it was like a corporate backed company, they said, no, you're going to talk to Fred. Fred is Derek's dad. Therefore, he's our human resources person. And I was like, okay. So we hired Fred because his son works here and is friends with some of the bosses. Okay, fine. Fred, no slight to Fred as a human being, but he'd never worked in tech before. He did not have any innate skills in tech. And just generally just didn't know what was going on, right? And so he said, okay, if you write up the requirements, I'll send some things out, but I'm going to write it myself. Just tell me what you need. And so I wrote him the general stuff I needed for a JavaScript developer. He comes back 2 weeks later, which is already way too long, and he drops some resumes on my desk, and I'm reading through them, and they're all software application developers. And I'm like, what are these people? They're doing like C# and Java. And he's like, yeah, Java developers. I was like, Fred, Java is not the same as JavaScript. They're 2 different languages. And he's like, well, it's the same. It's similar. And I was like, and so for weeks, we had this job posting up asking for non-existent skills that I was not looking for. And I'm sure the person was very confused. This is before the era of like full stack developers. It's like they need to do CSS layouts and like intense Java writing for like software applications. Like it had to have been the weirdest job posting ever. And the people who applied were people who were software application engineers who were very confident in the Java part, which to be fair is like the more difficult part of that. Not that CSS isn't hard. But what I learned from that is that don't trust anything you read, right? What I tend to see a lot is, the person who needs that person on their team writes the main piece, and then someone above them adds stuff that they want because they're trying to, it's a gamble, right? They're trying to lowball you for this and get the best experience out of this possible. And so you'll see a job that's like, you need to be a wireframer, a visual designer, and know SQL. No, I don't. No, that's probably not the case, right? So if they have one outlandish thing on there, like, you need to be a researcher and know Java, like ignore that and apply for it anyway. What they're hoping is they find someone who knows more about that because they're rounding up. They're trying to find the most crazy unicorn they can, and they're not going to find that. This same company that Fred did all these things for, once I started teaching, we were off on friendly circumstances. And so they reached out to me and they're like, yeah, we need a full stack web developer. We can pay up to $15 an hour. And I was like, none of my students are going to work for $15 an hour. And they're like, well, they're new, they're students, it's double minimum wage. And I'm like, they are trained in a skill. Come on, man. Like, it's not going to be $15 an hour. And they said, well, they have to be really experienced. We need your best students, and 15 is what we're willing to do. I said, there's no way you're getting that. And so then a few months later, they reach out and they're like, we're willing to pay 25 and we just need someone intermediate. And I'm like, I'm at a school. They are junior level and they will work for $50 an hour. And they eventually got up to like $50 an hour and someone new, and they did end up hiring one of my students. But they would play that game for months. And meanwhile, the team on the ground is suffering. And they're like, well, what if they know Java? What about this, right? And so what I would say is, if you feel like you're seeing outlandish claims and there are parts of it that don't make sense, go ahead and apply to the job. And then you have the power to sit with them and say, okay, listen, I do know some of these things. I don't know others. What does this job look like, right? And I know that the instinct here is that it's a waste of your time. It's not. Anytime you are practicing and talking about your stories of your projects, that is valuable time, well spent, right? So get into as many interviews on false pretenses as possible. Interview for anything. Just keep talking about your work, right? In the meantime, you can say like, I don't know, I do this and this and this. Do you really need someone who knows SQL database management as well as wireframing? Is that really a thing? And a lot of times they'll be like, no, Henry wanted that. And you're like, okay, cool. So I would say let that slide. When it comes to contract work, cold calling people, once if they say, how do you address compensation rate if you've never gotten paid to do your work? So I can speak to Denver. For Denver, I say $50 to $80 an hour, or 50 to 80K starting. There's a huge overlap of that Venn diagram, and then off the other sides. If I had time, I'd talk to you about taxes and employee taxes and how you're gonna have to save different amounts for that. But do that research, but 50 to 80K, either for a job or for hourly, is generally a good place to start. If you were coming from a previous job, ask for at least 10K more than you were making, unless you're making six figures, in which case I can't help you. You're in a specialized career and you're resetting to a degree, right? Are there resources for creative jams and hackathons in Denver? Yep, Meetup is a great place to do that. You can search Denver Hackathon, and I see that some other people did post that Adobe is having another creative jam for boot camps in the fall. Yeah, they do it about once a year, so there will be more things. Unfortunately, I don't have a dedicated resource for that. How many projects is too many to add to your portfolio? Okay, so I was capped at 9. When I started teaching, I'd been working in product design for 10 years, and I had 9 projects. And at that point, I had designed for web, app, iPad, and touch screen TVs and kiosk displays for like CES and like various trade shows and stuff. So I was showing them literally like one of everything and a duplicate of a few, right? So I would say 6 to 9 is solid, and you can cap it there. I lost the chat window. Cool. And those seem to be the questions. And I know we're basically we're very close to time. Are there other questions I can answer, or Lene, do I need to stop? What are we doing right now?
It's up to you. If there's more questions, we can hang out for a few minutes.
Yeah, if there's any more questions, I'm happy to answer.
Can I ask about the $50 to $80 an hour?
Yeah.
That seems high.
Yeah.
Is that really like?
Yeah.
Okay.
So now, are there tons of people who want to pay you way less than that? Absolutely. And it depends on your background and also the company, right?
Right.
So I've talked with startups before where I talk with them about maybe consulting or something like that, and I want to work for them, and when they say like, we can pay you X number of dollars an hour, I'm like, wow, I'm sorry, that's not right for me. Like, I can't do that. And they're like, we don't have any more money. And I'm just like, I know, I'm sorry, like it's not going to work, right? I empathize with that. Nonprofits and good causes, of course, I like take as much off as I can to try and make that a little bit better. So there are people that just honestly can't afford me after like 10 or 15 years of experience, and that's okay. I can recommend them to people like that, right? There are people who lowball you because they think they can get you for less. I have a student who absolutely wonderful designer, but she made some mistakes when she was younger and she has a felony. And eventually that will be off of her record. But because of that, people are using that as an excuse to underpay her because they're like, you can't go anywhere else because no one will trust you. And that's shitty fucking like hostage scenario shit that we're not going to tolerate, right? So I think it comes down to ability to pay. You will like, I have students who get a job working for $35, $40 an hour and fucking love it. And then in a couple of years, they're making double that, right? So I always say ask for 50 to 80 and see what ends up happening. Because no one is going, like, it's all about negotiation. If they're going to put like all sorts of weird shit on their job requirements, why not talk to them about what you're actually worth? The only people who have ever said like, don't call us again, it doesn't work that way, are people I wouldn't want my students working for anyway. So I would say start high and let them talk you down.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, of course. We have a question here. If you want to have your portfolio reviewed, how would you go about that? Would you suggest reviewing each other's portfolios with other students, or maybe use that as a way to network? All of the above, right? So at the point, like if you're able to talk with other UX designers, like you don't even need UX designers to review your portfolio, because there's a good chance that whoever's looking at your portfolio is a hiring manager or someone in some sort of non-creative job, and they're not going to know exactly what they're looking at anyway. They're going to know the terms enough, like they have that job for a reason. But the goal of your portfolio, I would say, is to explain it in layman's terms enough that anybody should be able to read it. I think practicing with other designers is great, because I can read anyone's design portfolio, whether I have 1 year experience or 10, and be like, wait, that doesn't make sense. What did you do for the project? Sorry, what was your role? Like, either it's clear how you made your design decisions or it's not, right? And a little bit of insider knowledge definitely helps when it comes to like UX practices. But in general, I should be able to describe it like Queer Eye. So Queer Eye is one of the greatest shows ever created. Everyone should watch every episode of it. Also, every episode of Netflix's like reboot of Queer Eye is a perfect case study. It is them telling the story of designing someone's home, someone's style, someone's hair, someone's personality in life. And they do it in a way that it makes sense to everyone. They iterate, they propose ideas, sometimes they're rejected and they have to iterate on them again, but each episode is a case study. And what they do perfectly is it's a design show for the average consumer, right? So look at the way that they take these really intense ideas, like, I don't know anything about food, but I know what Anthony is talking about. It makes sense to me. I have a beard, I don't get to take care of hair anymore. When Jonathan does someone's hair, I'm like, yeah, he should have a shortcut. It's breezy in the summer. Like, I don't know what the fuck they're talking about, but they describe it in a way that makes sense to me. That is your goal when it comes to your case study. So if you show this to another random person who is relatively related to your industry, they should be able to pick it up. So yes, practice with anyone. It is totally fine to cold call people on LinkedIn. My general rule of thumb, because I get these fairly frequently, is you want to not burden someone with a huge effort right from the start, right? So if I have never met you before and you just say, hi, look at my portfolio, I'm gonna be like, who the hell are you? What are you talking about, right? It's a little bit better if you say, hey, I saw your talk, Denver UX Newbies, and I really liked it. I'd love your input. Okay, we're getting someplace, right? If you can start with questions like, hey, I really like the work you're doing. I like the company you work for. I like the role you're in. I'd love to know more. Do you have any time to chat with me just about like how this goes on? Because chances are the person you're writing had just as confusing of a career move as you did, right? We're starting to see more formal programs that are about UX. But I mean, when I was going to school, like the best we had was like human computer interaction design. But even that was like very ethereal and high level. You had to learn like how computers work and stuff. And so it's only recently that we have like true UX design programs. So as a result, when you were saying, hey, I just want to do this and I'm confused how to do it, the person you're talking to is like, yep, got you 100%. I know exactly what that feels like. And they will want to reach out to you. If you can then leverage that into, would you mind looking at my portfolio? That's totally fine too, right? But don't do that ask immediately. Try and make it easy at first. At what point, worst case scenario, which is just it's time for someone to contemplate changing career paths, to consider taking an adjacent career path like data science, product, etc. I mean, my answer is never. I know that's a very utopian view of it, and it's kind of a privileged view because I have the degree in it and I've been doing this for a long time. I'm a white straight dude and I look like the basic avatar of what every designer developer looks like in Denver. If there was a creative character, this would be like the default look, right? Like, so I understand that I'm coming from a privileged experience. The thing though is that you don't necessarily give up that ultimate goal. What you do is you take work that gets you closer to it, right? So if you work at a company, I've had this a whole lot, where someone was like a talented illustrator or graphic designer, they get their first job offer, but they're like, but we mostly want you to do the thing you're already good at. And they're like, but I really want to do UX, right? Depending on where they are, maybe you turn that job down. But listen, if you're about to start eating out of trash cans in a week or two, like maybe take the job and figure out how to pivot it. The thing is that while you're doing anything, you can start a career in UX by practicing. There was a point when I was kind of upset with my career before I pivoted into teaching. That ended up being what I wanted to do. But there was this point where I was like, I don't know if this is what I want to be doing. And I was a writer in college. I loved writing, and I started getting really into writing. And just on my side, I started a collective of people that would review and work with my writing. And I ended up writing for all sorts of publications on the side, whether that was nonfiction or tech reporting or just creative fiction. I ended up making that into like a pretty decent side hustle before I left that for teaching, because I realized the storytelling I really wanted to be personal, but it was like a nice side thing. And I remember talking to people like, wait, you're doing this and you're writing for this magazine? Like, why are you doing that? I'm like, I don't know, I want to try both things. So the idea that you can only do one at a time, like not necessarily true. You will find a way to get there eventually, either through a different job or by continuing to practice it. So I would say no matter what you're doing for money, moment by moment, whether that's driving Uber or working at like an accounting firm, keep working on your portfolio, keep adding to it. And eventually when you have enough work in there, someone will be convinced to hire you. That's my advice.
Nick, I've got one last question for you.
Yes.
So you talked about making sure that we get paid what we are worth.
Yeah.
And you also talked about getting as many interviews as much as you can. And there's the obvious fallout point of like when they ask for the range, the recruiter asks for their hourly range. So can you resolve that for us a little bit and give advice on how to handle that?
Totally. So I have some connections. So I have some previous people I've worked with who have said, refuse to say the number first, make them say it first. And that to me is like so harrowing and terrifying to just look them in the eye and be like, $1, your turn. Like, I can't do that, right? Like, that's not how I roll, right? What I would say is what you want to do is you want to have research going in. So my number continues to be 50 to 80,000 starting. But I do that. I do research every month, every cohort when I'm doing this. Right now, it's a little bit scattered because I'm doing this for Seattle and LA and Denver. So it's kind of a mix together. But what I would say is you want to make at least 10K more than what you want or than what you were making. You want to ask for between 50 and 80K, depending on what you think you're worth. If you are fresh out of college or a college dropout, you have no previous work to kind of show for yourself, and you've not done anything related, then yeah, you might be asking for 40, right? 40 to 50. If you have had a professional job in the past, like you worked in an office, you were a product owner, or you, I don't know, just like had any sort of authority, like you worked with people, you wore a nice shirt and went to an office and you were a normal human being for society, then you're going to ask for that 60 to 70 range. And then if you're someone who not only has worked in the professional world, but also has been working in a field that is adjacent to it, you've been an illustrator, a graphic designer, you were a project manager, you know how you're a web developer, something like that, then that's when you start asking for 80 to 90, right? And what I always say is every company is going to have their own point that they can pay. And it's based on a huge amount of factors, right? But what you always say is that's my range, but it's negotiable upon benefits, right? So tell me what you want. And that way they can come back and say, you know, we don't have that, but we have 401k, we have stock that'll be vested within 3 years. We have these things. And then if they come down and it's like 10K less than what you wanted, but it was still like way more than you were expecting, you're like, well, why didn't you mention the health insurance? Of course I'm on board. That's worth $20,000 to me a year. But you can always act surprised and say, yeah, this works for me because of this thing you didn't mention. So I think always saying this is the range, but leaving it open, I think that's the kind of call to negotiate. And every good company negotiates. They will figure out a way to do that. Does that answer that question, or can I get any follow-up questions on like how to figure that out?
I have sorry, my same question, but I'm just still baffled because 50 to 80 or 50 to 60 dollars an hour is well into the six-figure range, and so I'm just so confused that it's like
it feels like it's well into the six-figure range, but it's actually not. Okay, so let's you guys can see my screen still, right? This will be my last little magic trick. Okay, so let's take let me get, there we go. Okay, so you're making $50 an hour, right?
Mhm.
That's 40 hours a week. If you're able to maintain 40 hours a week, which is hard when you're contracting, we're gonna do that times 52. So that's $104,000 a year, right? Feels like a lot, but it's not. Here's the thing. When you were contracting, you're not paying employee taxes, and so more is gonna be taken out of your paycheck. When I was doing employee, or when I had a couple of years where I was just doing contract work, it was 1099. So it was all just contract work. What I did is I made a savings account and I put 33% of what I made into that savings account. And at the end of each of those years, 1 year I had $4,000 left over. 1 year I had like $400 left over, right? So it almost completely takes it away. Now, I'm not a tax expert and I failed math several times in high school. So I need you guys to double check these numbers. Do not take my word verbatim for this, but I paid those 2 years about 33% of my income in taxes. So if I take that and just do 66, what I'm actually making net is $68,000 a year. Now, I'm 34 years old, so I'm not on my parents' insurance, which means I have to pay for my own insurance. I'm lucky enough to have a wife who can give me insurance, but she works a nonprofit. Her insurance sucks, right? That's the price you pay for doing good in the world, right? And so the cheapest plan I could find for a COBRA insurance or like some sort of open enrollment plan was going to be $1,500 a year for a healthy 30-something-year-old, right? You take that times 12, that is $18,000. So when we take $68,000 minus $18,000, what I'm actually pulling in net per year is $50,000 a year, right?
Okay.
And people are going to do this with you where they say, well, we could pay you $50,000 a year, or we could do $60 an hour. And you're like, oh, wow. They don't want you on their books. They don't want you as a full-time employee. They want to fire you more easily. They don't want to pay for your insurance. They don't want to have you have an employee parking spot, right? And so they try and trick you with that exact math, that idea that, oh, it's over $100,000 a year. It's not. Once you end up paying for all your own taxes, your own health insurance, and all these things, not to mention no one calls you when it's someone's birthday and they're eating a fucking birthday cake in the break room because they don't consider you a real employee, right? When you take all that out, you're actually not doing any better, right? So I would consider that going in, that it feels really cool to be making $60 an hour, but it's actually not that much if you are paying your own taxes. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
That's what I'm here for. All right. And with that, I think we're going to wrap it up. It was really great talking to y'all. Thank you so much. I pasted into the chat where you guys can find me from here. I have my LinkedIn and my website. My website doesn't have much information on it aside from a link to my LinkedIn. So feel free to just follow me there. But I was really happy to talk to y'all. I'm going to hand it back to Lene and Ryan. You guys have any closing thoughts?
Ryan dropped, but I'm here.
Okay, that's right. He had a hard stop. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was awesome. Very informative.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate all that great information. And if anyone wants to connect with me on LinkedIn as well, I didn't put my link in there, but I'm the only Lene Felice in the entire world, so very easy to find. And also join us on Slack. We have the Denver UX Slack channel. Let me know if you need an invite to that, or if you can find us there.
I'm also on that Slack channel. Yeah.
Yay! Yes, you are.
Yeah.
Cool. Oh, my dog almost just joined us, but I guess she's not going to. So I will say goodbye to everyone tonight. Oh, here she is. Marley says goodbye too. And we'll see you all in July. Thanks for coming.
All right. See you guys soon. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.